Hello, YouTube Collective, and welcome back to my little cozy corner here on the internet. So, today I want to talk about this new moon in Gemini. Yes, shall we? Let's talk about it. I want to start by saying I am sad to see the old cycle go when we started the whole new moon cycle about a month ago now with the Taurus new moon, and we went through all the different phases. And now we have made it all the way through an entire moon cycle, and we are in the Gemini season of the chart, or of the energy of the time. So here we are now, and we are starting a brand new season of moon seasons and full moons and first quarter and third quarter. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about my thoughts on this new moon cycle and this new seeding point with the Gemini new moon. There is so much going on in the astrology. I tried to write down all that I could see and make sense of everything that's happening with the astrology. And I just kind of, at the end, threw my journal down and was like, whatever, I'm just going to share what comes out, what I see, what I feel. And it's just a lot. I mean, first of all, Gemini moons are, it's always a very interesting time for me because I am a native. I am a Gemini moon. I am in the first decan of Gemini moons, and so I tend to feel all the feels. And I have my moon in a very personal, well, not personal, but private part of my chart. And let's just say I feel all the feels whenever the moons have their moments. And so I am so for this energy. And comment below if you know your moon sign and you have a favorite Gemini, or you know people who have Gemini moon, your favorite Gemini moon sign. I personally love President Barack Obama. He's a Gemini moon. Tina Turner, RIP Queen, she was a Gemini moon, and I just love the Gemini moon energy. So if you are a Gemini moon, or if you know your sun, moon, and rising, and you happen to know some people with Gemini moon and follow the astrology world, please shout them out, or tell me what you think about the Gemini moon space in astrology. I tend to feel all the feels with the Gemini moons. I love, it's probably, if not out of Taurus and Cancer, my favorite moon sign. And it's just because Gemini moons have such a tender, light-hearted, childlike energy to them. And so I tend to really get into the energy whenever I'm around Gemini moons. I can talk, and we talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. Of course, that is the Gemini energy, which I will cover in this video, but I figured I would just throw that out there. This is definitely a major time for me in my life, as it's just a lot of new beginnings. And so yeah, so let's talk about it. Without further ado, let's talk about this new seeding point in the skies with the Gemini moon part of the chart, and the sun being in Gemini. So of course, if you watch my channel, or if you just follow moon cycles, you don't even have to follow astrology to know what a new moon is, right? It is the dark moon, is, you know, when the moon is starting a brand new cycle, the sun and the moon are together, and the moon is dark, and you know, a new cycle is starting and seeding. And I call it the new beginning, the starting point, the planting stage, all the things. And so I tend to, just wait with these moon cycles, the new moon cycles, because you don't really know, or sometimes you do know a little bit, especially some of the predictive things in astrology, or if you follow sort of like um, a historical journey with astrology. I know, like I do, I tend to love to look back at when was the last time something similar to this occasion was happening, and what was going on in my life, and where was I at, and what were all the things, especially if it's a particularly important point in my personal natal chart. So with this one, you're in luck due to me being a Gemini moon. I actually had some time to kind of go back and sort of see, when was there a time similar to this cycle? And I want to share that, as well as tell you a little bit about what I am theming this moon based from that time of going back. So I am theming, when I went back and I looked over the last time this moon cycle was kind of occurring, with a Gemini new moon cycle. And I thought about my life then, okay? And then I quickly got out of that depressive state because it was not a great time in my life. But I also thought about the time that I'm in my life now, and just how it was such a difference, how it's just completely been a radical change. And I can't even imagine if you have personal planets or points that's connected with the Gemini energy. So I'm talking to you out there, if you are a Gemini sun, or maybe you have a Gemini Mercury or Mars, or what have you. If you have a personal or an important point in your chart that is touching down with this moon cycle, then you know just how intense this energy will be, and the changes that maybe perhaps have already started to occur in your life. I know it has in mine. And so anyhow, I'm going to just kind of give you a little snapshot of what I am calling or theming this moon cycle for, from the time I looked back, and sort of talk to you a little bit about why I feel this so strongly. Okay. So I am calling this cycle Unchained from My Past. And when I looked back, it was about 10 years ago, in 2016. We were at a similar time in this Gemini new moon phase, Gemini new moon phase. And we were at a similar time with the nodes of fate and destiny. The difference was, the north node was in Virgo and the south node was in Pisces, whereas now it's swapped, where the north node is in Pisces and the south node is in Virgo. And at that time, 10 years ago, the nodes were being squared by the new moon cycle. And there were a whole ton of other things going on. Whereas this time, the nodes are being squared this time around. So this new moon cycle, the nodes of fate and destiny, sort of like, where the universe is trying to point you and place you in life. The nodes are being squared this time around by Uranus, okay? The planet of freedom and change, and just being able to be be outside of the box, be where you want to be most, who you are authentically. And it's just such a different time. And I even wrote like a little story about that time 10 years ago, or almost 10 years ago, about 10 years ago. So it was 2016 around June. So about 10 years ago. And I wrote, there was a new cycle starting in your Gemini house that was centered perhaps around love, perhaps taking a chance in a love matter. Perhaps it was karmic and you felt chained to it and guided by impractical hope. But from a victim's perspective, it seemed like the only practical thing to do or to manifest at that time. And when I look back and I kind of compare my life to where I was then and where I am now, it's, it's such a vast change. I really do feel like I have been set free from my past. And I feel like a lot of people perhaps may feel this in that Gemini section of your chart. Everybody has Gemini somewhere in their chart. It doesn't matter if you are a sun Gemini, a moon Gemini, or have a personal planet or point at this Gemini moon cycle, new moon cycle. We all have a Gemini house in our natal charts. We all have a Gemini area in our life that this new moon cycle will be impacting, and probably have already started impacting and making changes and setting you free in areas, or I think when we're not ready to be set free, it just mostly feels like an uncomfortable, just chaotic, time is what it feels like. But it's really freedom, friends. It's really freedom. And I'm learning more and more how to embrace the freedom, how to go with the tugs and the pulls of the universe and where my life is heading and where fate and destiny are helping me to perhaps correct some steps that I made in previous years or even 10 years ago that I wasn't ready, or I didn't have the energy, right, of Uranus being in Gemini to really bring about that change that I needed. And so, honey, now Uranus is in Gemini and change is here, friends. That is the good news for the collective. Gemini wants us to change in that Gemini area of our chart, and we will change because what can I say? We are made up of the universe. And so let's talk more about what is going on at this Gemini new moon. As I've already mentioned, Gemini or Uranus has moved in Gemini and will be in Gemini until crickets, maybe about 8 or 9 years, I think, right? I can't remember the exact date. Could be around 2033 or shortly after that. And then, of course, we've already talked about this being a Gemini new moon seeding point. And we've talked about Uranus squaring the nodes, which I think is super important in this phase, in this new moon phase. This is something new and something that, quite frankly, friends, we have not had to experience probably for most of us in our lifetimes, as we have not had Uranus and Gemini since, wow, I don't even know, a long time ago. I didn't look up the dates, but it's definitely, it takes Uranus about 8 years, I think, to go around or to finish a sign. And so that's about 84 years it takes Uranus to go around the entire zodiac. So you do the math. We probably have never experienced Uranus in Gemini the way we are about to experience Uranus in Gemini now. So that is a very big deal, And so if you feel like there's so much change going on and there's so many things that are different, or perhaps things just don't work the way they used to anymore, perhaps consider, we are in very different times than maybe since, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 years ago, and even more so than that, because there's all kinds of different energies touching down with that as well. So let's talk about the mutual reception that's going on. A mutual reception is when one, I know I've talked about this on this channel before, but it's sort of when one sign and planet are in another sign and planet's place. So what do you mean by that? So we have the moon in Gemini and we have Mercury in Cancer. Where, well, Mercury wants to be in Gemini and the moon wants to be in Cancer, hence mutual reception. And so we are having this at this seeding point, where it's almost this sense of like the moon and Mercury are, they really get each other, even though they're not making what is considered to be an astrological sign-based aspect. They understand each other. There's a sense of understanding that can come. There's a flow about being in each other's hosting each other's planet, or sign. So when you have, Mercury hosting the moon for when the moon wants to be in Cancer, and you have Gemini, you have Mercury, what am I trying to say? Yes. And then you have Cancer in Mercury when Gemini wants to be there. And it's sort of like this hosting type thing going on. So what does it mean when that happens? Well, maybe because of that, and they have this understanding, one understands what the other may need, because it is the host. They're hosting each other's signs and where these planets want to be, or where these signs want to be. And so we have this mutual reception going on between the moon and Mercury during this seeding point. So I think that's pretty phenomenal when you think about that, because when I think about the moon and when I think about Mercury, I feel like they're so closely connected. The moon is sort of our innermost feelings, and it is sort of what we make of our surroundings, how we feel about things. It is really and truly, I think, our emotional realm is, it's a private part of us. It's a part that most people don't get to see, but it really and truly is who we are deep down inside. And so to have the moon in a reception with Mercury, which is that communicative, thinking, sort of just understanding and idea side of us, they're together. Talk about mind and perhaps soul being one, and so, or just even, I don't know, our moods, are kind of connected there for a moment, even though they, like I said, they're not making a sign-based aspect, but they're being hosted by one another's signs, which there is this understanding that is different and that can be felt between those two energies, I believe. So here we are at this new moon phase, and we have this going on. Now, I wrote down a couple of things I wanted to say about, well, what is Gemini energy, right? Gemini energy in tarot, okay? Gemini is the twins, which I think is really cool. I think that it's the first time when you go around the zodiac where you see people, when you see an actual person. We have had a new cycle in Aries kicking off the astrological year. And of course, that's the ram. And then we had a new moon cycle in Taurus, which is the bull. And here we are now, and this is the first time, this new moon seeding point in Gemini, and things become real. Things become very personal. You see actual people living out, I believe, this human experience, and this human manifestation in our lives at this seeding point. And so, well, what does that mean, you might ask? I think what I love about Gemini energy is it can represent that ability of having a choice. It can also represent, seeing the higher side and the lower side. There is definitely a duality to the Gemini energy, like there is a duality really to all signs. It's just the Gemini energy is so marked by it because you do see two when you look at the traditional zodiac wheel of the twins. And um, I think there's a sense of this choice, wanting a choice, needing a choice, and having a choice. And when I say that, I think that is, quintessential Gemini energy. Gemini loves having a choice, it wants to be able to choose, it wants to be able to pick, do I like this? Do I like that? And it wants to be outside of the box. And I really, really appreciate that about the Gemini energy. Perhaps with Jupiter being still so close to Venus. Remember, we just had that conjunction, the new seeding point with Jupiter and Venus coming together again for a new seeding point and starting off their new cycle in Cancer. And so maybe it's a choice in love, Jupiter and Venus, the two benefics, the two planets, one's ruling abundance and expansion and, giving, and the other pretty much ruling love and giving and money. And who knows, maybe these two coming together, it is about a love relationship or making more money. It could be about a choice to make more money for you right now in your life. It could be about expanding your family, or doing something around the family that seems expansive. Maybe you're redoing your home or changing things up a bit, with your family, or taking a family trip that's far away somewhere with Jupiter, right? Or a creative venture that calls after your heart, I mean, when this new moon cycle kicks off, of course, Venus will have already moved into Leo. And, I thought about it. I was like, maybe this is the time where it's, even though it's out of sign and considered an out of sign conjunction, it's still close to Jupiter in Cancer. And there is sort of this sense of like, I want to manifest doing this because this is where my heart is. This is where I want to put my energy. This is where I want to put my time. This is what makes me feel loved and happy, you know? Or, maybe it's a place where you call home, maybe you are like wanting, a choice in where you live or how you live, something around the home, right? Either way, it's a new energy, right? It's breaking free from the chains. We have Uranus there to help us set us free and give us that sense of freedom. And like, I can choose. I do have a choice to make. I'm not chained, I can break free from whatever is constraining me or making me feel like I have to do this, thing here only, perhaps from past mindsets or past conditioning, Gemini energy is just incredible. And I think that with this cycle, we are going to see, if we aren't already seeing, how it has already begun the work. With Uranus moving into Gemini, it had already started that. But, even more so now that we are in this cycle, we can bring it about even more. We can welcome this energy of change and welcome this energy of newness with, the understanding if something new is popping up in my life, then wow, like, let's see, because this is very destined. It's very fated, friends. And I think that, um, if anything, you can be, you can have hope, I guess, and knowing that, the universe, no matter what journey is taking you on or what journey your life has already set out to take you on, that we have no control over, we are able to allow that freely to happen. So let's see, what else did I write? I think that may be it, friends. I wanted to talk or make some worthy mentions about this time. Mercury is in shadow right now. Dun, 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 dun. So what does that mean? Well, Mercury is going to be turning retrograde on the 29th at the end of June. So I think that's the same day as the full moon in Capricorn. So it should be a pretty interesting, a pretty interesting time, following in our lives and just kind of seeing all the different changes. There will be a full moon and there will be Mercury turning retrograde, but we have already started that shadow of what is coming in this Mercury, retrograde, of Mercury just kind of turning back over through this time in our lives, and perhaps, to revisit or sort of to plan or, plans, not plan, but just sort of revisit something that we had already planned, or sort of revise a plan. I always like to look at Mercury retrogrades, or even when we're in shadow time, as what was calling to me that I put down in this Gemini area of my house, a chart, and it's sort of coming back home to me now. It's sort of ringing, it's all of a sudden showing back up again. And we may see this around this new seeding point of old things coming back around, and you're like, wait a minute, well, just know that Mercury is in shadow, and it's preparing to go retrograde and take us back through, perhaps, Mercury is in Cancer, old feelings, old emotions, right? You may even run into old family members, or old family members may reach out to you that you haven't spoken with in a long time. But just know that, that's also something that's going to be happening around this new cycle as well. So yeah, I think I'm going to wrap it up there, friends, and just say that I am wishing everyone a happy new moon cycle, and whatever is manifesting in your life, I hope that it brings about a feeling of being unchained, a feeling of freedom, a feeling of, this is what's next in my life, and I am ready to embrace it. I am ready to let it in. I am ready to explore it. Even I know the exploration side is sort of that Sagittarius, but again, it is on that same axis as Gemini. And so, with Gemini and Sagittarius being opposite signs, we can still look to have a time where, we can decide to explore this new fated energy that we are experiencing. So, with that, I am going to wrap up this time, and I will probably be back on here. I've been trying to come up with some ideas on some topics I want to share. I may come back and talk a little bit about Chiron, as Chiron is going to be changing signs. as we go through this new cycle, Chiron is going to leave Aries where it has been at for the past 8 years and dip into Taurus. It's going to come back into Aries, but it's going to, go into Taurus for a little while. And so talk a little bit about Chiron and healing that, we may be going through on a personal level or on a collective level. So I may come back and talk about that a little bit. And yeah, as we journey on through this season and this cycle. So happy new moon, friends, and I will be back another time. Goodbye.